It started with a name missing from the list. 20 recruits were scheduled to shoot that morning. Only 19 showed up. The instructors double-checked, even called roll twice. But no one questioned the older man sitting quietly by the edge of the bleachers, sipping burnt coffee from a dented thermos. He didn't speak, didn't wear a badge. No one had seen him arrive. Some thought he was base maintenance. One joked he might be waiting for his grandson. And when the firing drills began, they barely noticed him watching. But by the time the sun hit high noon, that same forgotten man would step onto the line and break the SEAL shooting record with a weapon half those recruits could barely handle. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we continue this emotional story, tell us in the comments, from which city in the world are you watching this video today? And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We're growing every day, and I sincerely thank you for being a part of it. The SEAL compound at Coronado was quiet that morning. Not the kind of quiet that feels peaceful, but the kind that hums beneath the surface. The kind of quiet before a storm, or a drill, or a reckoning. The sun hadn't burned through the marine layer yet, and the fog clung to the gravel range like breath on cold glass. A row of fresh recruits stood on the concrete pad in formation, rifles slung, nerves masked behind layers of adrenaline and sarcasm. They were in their 5th week of training, just past the point where confidence starts to grow teeth. Most of them still had bruises on their forearms and blisters on their feet, but they'd survived Hell Week. They believed they'd earned the right to start making jokes again. Today's rotation was supposed to be simple. Live fire drills, timed precision shots, targets at variable distances. The instructors called it muscle memory reinforcement. The recruits called it, finally, something cool, at least until they noticed the old man by the bleachers. He was already there when they arrived, seated alone on the wooden bench, hands resting on his knees, a plain green ball cap pulled low over his face. He didn't wear a badge, didn't wear anything Navy issue, just a faded black windbreaker zipped up to the collar and jeans that had seen too many wash cycles. He looked like someone who'd wandered in from the wrong base, or maybe the right one, at the wrong time. Some recruits didn't notice him at first. Others glanced and looked away. But a few started whispering. Who's that guy? No idea. Probably logistics or someone's uncle. Did he just bring a thermos to the range? They laughed. Not cruelly. Not yet. Just the way young men do when they don't know they're being watched by a ghost. Chief Larson, the lead instructor, didn't mention the man. He barked through the morning brief like clockwork. Timing, distance, chamber checks, expected grouping, fire on command. The recruits nodded, repeated back the cadence. No one interrupted. No one dared ask. And the man just sat there, still, unreadable, like a statue no one remembered putting there. Until one of the younger guys, Ramirez, leaned in toward his buddy and muttered loud enough for a few heads to turn. Dude's probably here to study what not to do. A few chuckles. The man didn't react. Not to the whisper, not to the glances. Not even when they started moving into firing lanes. He didn't flinch as the rifles cracked one after another. Just sat there, watching. Not cold, not angry, just quiet. One instructor glanced over once. Chief Maddox, former sniper turned evaluator, and hesitated, just for a second, then turned away, as if he'd seen something familiar but couldn't place it. The drills began. Each recruit was timed individually. 10 targets, 20 rounds, fixed mag reload. Pressure mounting with each shot. Some performed well, others folded. A few let nerves crawl into their triggered discipline. The instructors took notes, gave corrections, called out tight groupings. The wind picked up. Fog lifted. Sun came in sharp through the clearing. And still, the man didn't move. It wasn't until the 4th round, after a misfire and a jammed reload, that someone finally broke the silence. Ramirez. Again. As he stepped off the line, frustrated, he turned toward the bleachers and raised his voice just enough. Hey, old-timer, enjoying the show? Want me to autograph your hearing aid? His friends laughed. But the man didn't even blink, didn't look up, didn't smile. And for a moment, just a fraction, something in the air shifted. Not enough for anyone to notice consciously, but enough for a few to glance toward him with less humor in their eyes. Enough for Maddox to pause again, his mouth half open like he was on the verge of a memory. Enough for Larson to look up from his clipboard, then immediately look back down. The man finally moved slowly, shifting one foot to rest on the edge of the gravel. He reached down, not for a rifle, not for a radio, but to take a sip from that old metal thermos. And for just a second, a patch on the sleeve of his jacket slipped into view. It was faint, faded from time and sunlight, but unmistakable to the trained eye. A trident, the seal insignia, worn down to its threads. None of the recruits noticed, but Maddox did, and Larson, and they exchanged a look across the range that didn't need words. This day would not go as scheduled. The wind carried the crack of each round across the range like distant thunder, but the rhythm was uneven. Some shots clean, others rushed or wide. Recruits adjusted their sights, fumbled their reloads, shouted over each other's mistakes. The instructors watched without flinching, calling times, giving curt nods when someone hit more than 7 targets. Maddox, however, wasn't watching the recruits anymore. His eyes kept drifting back to the man in the windbreaker, the one who still hadn't said a word. That worn seal insignia on his sleeve wasn't standard issue. It wasn't ceremonial. It was real, sun-bleached and softened by years of wear, the kind of patch that belonged to someone who had earned it a long time ago and never needed to explain it. Larson approached him between rounds, clipboard in hand, his voice lowered. "You here to observe, or should I clear the deck?" The man finally turned his head. His eyes, visible now under the edge of his cap, were dull steel, unimpressed, unshaken. "I'm just watching," he said. His voice was dry but intact, firm but not loud. It didn't demand respect, it assumed it. Larson nodded, hesitated for half a breath, and said nothing more. But from that point forward, something changed. Recruits began to glance over their shoulders more often, jokes quieted, focus shifted. Even Ramirez, cocky as ever, reloaded with a little more care. But pressure brings out cracks, and when the 5th shooter tripped over his own sling and accidentally fired into the gravel, chaos snapped back into the field. Instructors swarmed in, shut down the line, ordered mags out and chambers cleared. No one was hurt, but the mood soured fast. Embarrassment turned to tension. Tension turned to distraction. And in the middle of it all, the man on the bench stood up. He didn't speak. He didn't rush. He simply walked toward the line, step after steady step, his boots crunching on the gravel like the only sound that mattered. Larson stepped forward to intercept him, hand raised halfway. "Sir, this is a live fire zone." But the man didn't stop. He paused just before the threshold, close enough for everyone to see the faded trident on his sleeve, the heavy creases of his jacket, the slow, precise way he turned his head to the recruits. "You said the record still stands, right?" Larson blinked. "Which record?" 10 in 10, the man replied. "Steel plates, 3 distances under 15 seconds. Maddox's mouth opened slightly. "That record hasn't been touched in 8 years. The man looked at him, then past him, toward the targets. "I know, I said it." There was silence. Not just quiet, but that vacuumed stillness that swallows a field when something sacred walks into it. A few of the younger recruits laughed nervously, unsure if this was some instructor's test or a joke with a long setup. But Larson didn't laugh. Maddox didn't blink. And when the man reached for the rifle on the stand, a standard issue M110, not customized, not modified, no one stopped him. He picked it up like it weighed nothing, rolled his shoulder once, and chambered around with a sound so smooth it felt rehearsed. Larson glanced at Maddox. Maddox gave the faintest nod. And the buzzer was reset. The recruits backed away. Some crossed their arms. Others pulled out their phones, ready to record what they thought would be a valiant attempt by a veteran with shaky hands and faded memories. No one expected what was coming. Not even the ones who had started to suspect. He stepped onto the firing line with no fanfare, no warm-up, no instruction. He didn't adjust his stance like the others had, didn't fiddle with the scope or pace the gravel to get his breathing under control. He just planted his feet, leveled the rifle, and let his body settle into a position that didn't look like training. It looked like instinct, like memory, like home. Behind him, the air shifted. Recruits leaned forward. Instructors stopped writing. Phones trembled slightly in young hands. And when Larson finally gave the call, "Shooter ready?" he didn't answer with words. He gave a single nod, crisp and sharp. The buzzer sounded. And then, silence broke. The first shot landed with a clean metallic ring. The second came before the echo of the first had even faded. Target 3 fell a fraction of a second later. He didn't shift wildly between positions. His elbows didn't dance, his shoulders didn't roll. Every shot was a whisper of movement, a breath, a twitch of a finger. The rhythm wasn't rushed. It was perfect. 4, 5, 6. Each one struck steel dead center, and by the time he reloaded, only 5 seconds had passed. No hesitation, no wasted motion. He slammed the second mag in with the familiarity of someone who hadn't just practiced it, someone who had once relied on it to stay alive. 7, 8, 9. And then, with a slight adjustment of elevation, a whisper of wind compensation calculated in a glance, he squeezed one final time. 10. The last plate rang out with a clarity that seemed unnatural, like the range itself was holding its breath for that final sound. The buzzer chirped, the rifle lowered, and for a second, no one moved. The clock on the screen behind the line blinked. 13.2 seconds, a full second and a half faster than the previous record. No misses, no hesitation, no retakes, just precision, silence, and steel. Larson stared. Maddox exhaled the way men do when something sacred happens. The recruits didn't cheer. They didn't know how. One of them, the youngest, finally muttered, "Who the hell is this guy?" The man set the rifle down on the bench as gently as if he were returning a borrowed gift. He turned, nodded once toward Larson, and began walking back across the range. He didn't ask for applause, didn't offer advice. He simply walked away like nothing had happened, like the world hadn't just seen something no one there could explain. As he passed the line of recruits, not a single one met his eyes, not out of shame, but out of awe. And when he reached the bleachers again, he picked up his thermos, took another sip, and sat down like the day had just begun. The range didn't return to normal after the shot. No one moved to replace the targets. No one dared to step back on the line. For the first time in weeks, the recruits were silent. Not the silence of obedience or fatigue, but the kind that comes when something inside you shifts and you're not quite sure how to name it. A few stood with arms crossed, pretending to be unaffected. Others just stared at the ground, trying to process what they'd witnessed. Even Ramirez, always first with a quip, said nothing. He just watched the man on the bench with a different posture than before. Not confrontational, not defiant, but something closer to reverent. Maddox slowly approached the firing bench, glancing at the digital clock still glowing with the numbers 13.2. He ran a finger along the rifle's chamber, then looked toward Larson. "That's not muscle memory," he said under his breath. "That's something else." Larson didn't respond. He was already walking toward the bleachers. The man looked up as the instructor stopped in front of him. There was no pride in his face, no challenge, no expectation. Just the calm of someone who'd already done what he came to do. Larson hesitated, then finally spoke. "Why today?" The man looked out at the range, where the last plate still swung gently in the breeze. "Because I wanted to see if I still could." He said it not like a boast, but like a confession. Larson nodded slowly, as if realizing too late that this wasn't a demonstration. It was a farewell. Back near the line, one of the younger recruits whispered something and pointed. Another nodded. Within minutes, someone pulled up an old training database, then another, then Maddox. Names cross-referenced, time-stamped, archived. And there it was, Master Chief Evan Cole, SEAL Team 6, retired 15 years ago, instructor for advanced marksmanship, last active record, 2008. One recruit read it aloud, another searched deeper, commendations, operations, ghost missions, a quiet legend whose name had been buried under time and turnover. By the end of the hour, every recruit on that range knew who he was, not because he told them, not because someone bragged on his behalf, but because when someone performs at that level, truth doesn't need a voice. It carries itself. When the range shut down for the day, no one dared speak to him directly. But one by one, the recruits walked past the bench on their way to debrief. Some nodded. Some said, "Sir." A few offered quiet thank yous. He responded to each with a slight tip of the head, a gesture so small and steady it felt heavier than any salute. When Ramirez passed, he didn't say a word. He just stopped, looked him in the eye, and gave a single, unpolished salute. The man returned it. Brief, honest, unpretentious. He left just before sundown, walking across the compound with his jacket zipped high and his cap pulled low. He didn't take the main exit, just disappeared behind the maintenance lot, into a part of the base no longer mapped on current rotations. No one saw a car, no one saw a goodbye. But somehow, that made it feel even more like something sacred had happened. That night, a new target board was mounted at Lane 3, where the shot had been fired. No names, no quotes, just one line engraved in brass. 13.2. Cole. And in the weeks that followed, something changed. The laughter at the range grew quieter, less about proving toughness and more about bonding. Recruits stopped rushing their reloads. They started watching the wind more carefully. They stopped mocking what they didn't understand. And Evan Cole never returned. But somehow, he never really left. Some legends don't need monuments. They don't need speeches or medals or stories carved in stone. Sometimes all it takes is one moment, a silence after the last shot, a record left on a dusty screen, a name etched on a brass plate without ceremony or explanation. Evan Cole didn't show up to impress anyone. He didn't show up to remind them who he was. He came because something inside him still whispered, "You've got one more in you." And when that whisper met the trigger, the entire range changed. We spend so much time looking for strength in noise, in volume, in swagger, in titles. But the greatest strength is the kind that doesn't ask to be seen. It waits. It listens. It acts when the time is right, and then it disappears without needing credit. That was Evan Cole. A man no one noticed until they couldn't stop thinking about him. A man who taught without words, who reminded them, in 13 seconds, what discipline really looks like. And maybe the next time they step onto that range, they'll think twice before laughing at someone's silence. Maybe they'll slow down. Maybe they'll breathe. And maybe, just maybe, they'll remember that the man who left them speechless wasn't trying to be a legend. He was just doing what he always did. Exactly what needed to be done. Exactly when it mattered. This story was brought to you by The Human Stories. Have you ever met someone who didn't say much, but whose presence changed everything? Tell us in the comments what they meant to you and how they impacted your life. And if you think stories like this need to be heard, hit that subscribe button to support the channel. We'll see you in the next one.